But I remember praying that night. I did. I remember praying. I looked out the window and I said, God, I said, you've got to take me or you got to help me, because I can't live this way anymore.
Have you experienced firsthand a change in your life due to God? Are you looking for a change in your life? God's Spirit blows wherever it wishes. You hear its sound, but you don't know where it comes from or where it's going. It's the same with everyone who is born of the Spirit. Welcome in.
You realize you were in a place that just could not continue.
Yep.
So it's either help me or take me up.
Yeah, which, I mean, I didn't expect, you don't use need to statements with God, right?
Right.
Because God don't need to do anything, right? I know this. But I had fallen away from my faith, and I don't even know what made me pray that night, but I just remember, I went to bed and went to work the next day, and I think it was a couple days later. It was probably a week, 2 weeks maybe, tops, after we filled out the app, that I got acceptance to go to this program.
The Teen Challenge.
Yeah,
program.
Teen Challenge. And I'm like, oh, great. Well, I thought to myself, well, you don't really have clothes and stuff for a whole year, right? Like, how are you going to live? You can't work while you're there, right? I did some research on the program, and you can't work while you're there. You can't do these things, and a man works, right? A man take whatever.
You felt the responsibility pushing in. How are you going to do this?
So I told this pastor, I said, look, like, there's just no way that I can, manage all this and get the clothes and the things I need to be able to know. He insisted, and through some help from the church and help from his family directly, they went out and got, a Bible for me, some clothes, things I would need. And I'm like, okay, well.
Really going the extra mile.
Yep. And so, yeah, man, one thing led to another, and got everything together. And I just remember the night before, I think it was January 9, 2002. I know that because the night before that, I had a friend over, and I drank the last of the beer I had in the fridge, smoked some cigarettes. He tried to convince me, you're not that bad, it's not that bad. And the next morning, the pastor was actually late coming to get me, right? And so my friend told me, he said, well, just leave. Just, leave, go somewhere. I'll tell him I didn't see you, and then, that'll be that.
This was your out.
Yeah, this was it. So I'm headed down the stairs. My apartment was top floor. I'm headed down the stairs, and here comes the pastor.
And then he showed up.
He did. And I was frustrated.
It was kind of like the church being locked for a few times, and then suddenly he appeared at a time you weren't expecting.
Yep. And so he drove me down there. And no cigarettes that morning. Like, that's all I wanted. I was almost 3 packs a day I was smoking. I didn't get a single cigarette. We got there. He said, look, I'll wait with you. We'll get this figured out. He took me in there, and he was sitting with me in the room where they do the intake. And he stepped out to use the bathroom. And that was the last time I saw him.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just sitting there in that room, right? And I remember asking him about that after I gotten out and everything. And he told me, he said, well, I knew you were never going to stay if I just stayed there. Right. He said, so I left.
Had to let you go and do it.
Yep. Sick. Oh, them first weeks were tough. At least 2 weeks. First week, slept in the same room with a bunch of guys, bunk beds. Like, I mean, it wasn't that the rooms were dirty or anything. They weren't. Like, it was sufficient. But man, I'm trying to not think about drinking. I can't eat because my stomach's messed up, and it's just like one long hangover.
So how did you get through it?
Prayer. I just remember thinking to myself, holy moly, if this is not where I'm supposed to be, then I need to leave. Well, we're in Minneapolis. Yeah. I mean, I grew up on gravel roads in northwest Minnesota. Like, where am I going to go in Minneapolis, right? Like, that's, which in the end I think was a godsend, truthfully. Being somewhere that I didn't know, around people I didn't know, with no avenue or outs.
You were there, you had to do it, you had to stick it out.
Yeah.
As hard as it was, the conditions being what they were, but you prayed and you just kept going day by day.
Yep, and just when I thought things would straighten out, I get a certified letter in the mail. My wife wants a divorce.
in the middle of doing this, you get divorce papers.
Right in the beginning of the program when I'm feeling the worst, right? And I tried to call her and I tried to, whatever, but it wasn't having it. And so I'm like, well, okay. So I went and I remember telling the dean of men and the other individual that headed the program, I said, look, I got these divorce papers and, there's no way that I can, get back to where this is and then get back here in one day. Well, I think they gave me 72 hours or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, to get down there and then go to court that day and then be back the day after that by, I think it was 9 o'clock at night or something, or 8 o'clock at night.
Basically, they give you a few days to go get this taken care of.
Yep. So I did. I went to court. Judge asked me what I was doing for work. Obviously, trying to sort out the child support stuff. While I explained to him I was in the program and that I couldn't work. They don't allow, to have a paying job. They give you something to do, but the focus is on yourself and on God. And so there's no paying job. And I said, if my child support's going to compound for a year,
it's not going to work.
Yeah. He said, well, we only got so much time to figure this out. So he said, I'm going to send you down to, I think the social service or whatever was built right into the courthouse there in Brainerd. And we went down there. Well, the lady that was helping us, she knew about the program and she knew about people that went through it and was successful. So again, right, like there's another thing. And the lady said, well, there's a way we can stay your child support for a year. But then, my then soon-to-be ex would have to receive help from the county, basically, to help raise our son. And so I was like, okay, well, I can't use that excuse now because clearly, and so it all got worked out. And I made it back to the program, actually. It was an adventure, but we got back there on time. Yep.
So already you've had so many things along the way since the store began, where you had outs, or you could quit, give up.
Impossibilities,
circumstances that are just insurmountable. And you continually had these people stepping in and allowing these different things and helping you in different ways to continue this process.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I think I discounted the fact that God was involved. I discounted it like, coincidence. And then I get back and it's probably a week later. Then the dean of men and somebody else, they come and say, look, the medical bills are piling up. Well, they had me into the dentist. They had me into the doctor. I was going through mental health counseling because I was, it's the first time in my life for probably 12 years that I haven't had a drop.
They have the scanner going over you and completely overhauling everything.
Just a running tab, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, your medical bills are mounting up. And the county where I came from, which I think was Crow Wing maybe, but they said they're not going to give you, I think it was Minnesota Care or something at that time, and they're not going to give you a stipend because you weren't sent here to get help. You chose to come here to get help. And so there's this hang up, and if you don't get this to go through in a week or so, then you're probably not going to be able to stay in the program because the medical bills were going to be insurmountable, like I was going through it.
Obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. That seems to be what Darin kept rubbing up against as he was trying to make this positive change in his life. But thankfully, God had other plans, and he placed people strategically along this path that he was on. Thank you for joining us in this next chapter of Darin's life, and watch for the next part of his journey.